Okay, I'm going to talk a little bit about testing your equipment and equipment failures, because if you don't test it, you won't know the weak spots in your equipment. One of the things that, a good pair of sturdy shoes when you're out hiking, or if you would have to do a lot of walking, or whatever the situation. So I had purchased myself a pair of earth shoes a while back, and I've walked a little bit in them, a couple of miles here, a couple of miles there, but I hadn't really put them to a strenuous test until recently, just this past weekend, when we went on a camping trip and we did a whole lot of hiking. And let me tell you what, you can tell by the soles of these shoes. They're not very old, and most of this wear on them right now is even from the weekend rather than before, because they were relatively new shoes. Well, after only 8 or 9 miles of hiking, this is what happened. The sole completely came loose off of the shoe, and if it wasn't for some duct tape I keep in my emergency in my pack, I would have had a hard time walking the 1.5 miles out of the camp up to the vehicle to get another pair of shoes. Okay, so here's where I keep my duct tape, just to save space. I took it and I wound a bunch of it around my Berkey here, my sport Berkey. And so that way I always have duct tape and I need it, and boy did it come in handy this weekend. Like I said, I had to wrap that duct tape 3-4 times around my shoes and it held. I walked 1.5 miles back out of the camp through a relatively rocky terrain back up to the vehicle, where I had a spare pair of shoes. Actually, I had 2 spare pairs of shoes, because I didn't carry the extra shoes in my bag, because you can only, you only want to tote so much that you have to. But I did have a spare pair in my vehicle, which was a good thing. And luckily that spare pair happened to be a pair of, hiking / everything summer type sandal shoes. So I had them, and they were very comfortable. So I was able to switch those and finish the last couple of hikes out with these shoes. Another point of failure, which luckily it wasn't the tent itself, but let's see if we can get some good light. The tent storage bag completely just came apart. And this tent, as you can tell, has not been used that much. I think camping wise, we used it 2 times, maybe 3. And this is what it did. The whole end just ripped out of it. And it was not stored in the open in between camping trips. It was stored in the shed, covered on a shelf. So when you look at if you look at the condition of the rainfly, honestly, I mean, it looks still pretty much brand new. But that's what happened. So luckily, I had extra bungee cords with me in my pack. So I just bungee corded the tent and hooked it to my backpack, which ended up even being easier than trying to carry it. And then my little granddaughter carried the ripped up pack with the rain fly over it. So what was the success over the weekend? The BioLite camp stove. Fits in this little pack here. I would put it right in my backpack. It boiled our water fast. Took just a few sticks. I had some little fire starter. I picked up some of these little zips and I just broke off a little piece, and they burn for up to 18 minutes. Well, it only takes about 2 minutes to boil water with this stove. So let me tell you what, a little piece of that along with a few little twigs, and you can get a really nice fire going. We boiled our water, we made coffee, we had everything that we needed. And so total success. I've liked this stove since the time my son bought it for me a couple of years ago. And it's just, for me, in my eyes, it's better and better. It was a total success compared to the couple of failures that we had. So, long story short, check your equipment, test it regularly. If it needs replacement or needs repair, get it done before you're in a situation where you really, really need it. Luckily, the equipment failure did not involve the tent itself, which if it would have involved my tent, it still would not have been that bad, because we did bring a couple of hammocks and I had a tarp. So if worse came to worse, I could have done the tarp, the hammock with the tarp over it, and we still would have had a good secure place to sleep. And a good way to test your equipment and kind of get out there if you don't have a piece of, property or a place where you can go is to not just go camping, but go primitive camping. Get out there where you have to hike in, where there's no accessible water for you unless you hike out and get water, where you basically have to rely on yourself and what you bring in or walk out and get it. So that's the best way to actually, you know, test some of your equipment and your stuff and put it in the reality of the wilderness rather than popping up that tent and walking those shoes on some cement or something, because going over rocks and dirt and down hills and up hills and around turns is completely different than just a nice little stroll on a paved sidewalk or a concrete sidewalk. So again, get yourself out there, make sure that you're in shape. We've Before we went on this camping trip, because over the winter I'd gotten a little lazy too, and so I decided that one of the things I was going to do was start walking a minimum of 2 miles every night. And then I started stretching that because I used to do anywhere from 5 to 10 miles a day last year and the year before. And like I said, I got kind of lazy there. So this way I started doing 2 miles at a time and then stretched it further and further. So when we went on this primitive trip, this hiking trip, and doing 11, 12 miles a day, it was not a problem because I had worked myself back up to it again. My granddaughter very easily does, 10, 11 miles a day. My little nephew, this was, or great nephew, this was one of his first real major hiking trips. So it was a bit traumatic for him. Now we did short stints. We didn't just go out and do 11 miles in one stretch. We would do like a mile and a half somewhere. We set up camp, like that, and then hike out and then hike into a place to go swimming and so forth. So we broke it up, but the total mileage in a day was between 11 and 13. So breaking it up for him made it easier, because even a mile and a half, if you're not used to that distance, can be a bit traumatic, especially like I said, you're not walking flat. A mile and a half flat at the park is different than, going up, rocks and trying to keep your footing and stuff. So keep in mind, the terrain, and be prepared to go over different terrains.